Good afternoon, and welcome to another episode of My Fiber Fun. Well, after thinking about the Mr. Andrews story, I said I might can get this wrapped up by Sunday, if not definitely by next Wednesday. I had to dig deep and think about, okay, what all happened, because I know I left you with the cliffhanger about the book. And when I thought about everything that happened dramatic wise with the book, I thought, well, that's not going to really take too long to tell, because I was saying that's a long story. It is, but it isn't. Because basically, the story is what's going to lead up to some other events that happen. And then after those events happened, then came his death, basically right after that, or his final days. And so basically, once I finish today, I will be to the point where he was about to die, 12 days, before he passed away. So I'm thinking I might be able to wrap it up Sunday if I do a wee bit longer video, maybe an hour or so. If not, then I can break it into 2 parts and be done with the story by next Wednesday. Well, I frogged again, you guys. I've actually been working on this for 3 days, and what I did is the V-stitch. I decided to go with the V-stitch because I didn't want anything just plain simple for my little jean scarf, and I want this to be extra long. Well, when I started on the second set of the second pair, because it's doubled, of the Kobu yarn, this is how far I had gotten. And so I had chained, I believe, 65, and I said, this is too wide, I can narrow this. So I narrowed it down today because it wasn't going to be long. It would have still been a nice scarf, but I wanted to be an extra long scarf that I can wrap and snood and all that. Although I would have been able to snood this, it would not have been long. This is the width of it. I have it like this, but this is the actual width. So that was too much. So it's gonna be like this wide now, where you see my fingers. So I'm frogging it. Actually, it's still here. I'm just crocheting from it. So instead of 65, I chained 35. And I think this will be fine, because although it's wide enough, although it's a lot more narrow, I can always, at the end of it, I can always give it a wider border to make it wider. So I think this, and then this will give me an extra long scarf. That's the whole point. I'm not trying to make a shawl or anything. And yeah, I'm into the preliminaries now. And speaking of shawls, y'all think I forgot about the watermelon shawl, huh? Now, there's going to be 2 different ways. I know that some of you have requested that I show you how to make the triangle mesh shawl, which is what I'm wearing now. Actually, because although it's hot outside, I have the fan going. If I turn it off, I'll have a hot flash, and I'm not trying to go through that. And y'all know, my hysterectomy, I was 29 years old when I had a total full oophorectomy, which is everything, right? And due to endometriosis. And I went through the change back then. In fact, it was fun because when my mother went through her change years after me, I was able to tell her what to expect. That was just so weird. I'm like, Mom, you're supposed to be telling me about the change, not me telling you. But anyway, when that happened, I went through the change, and then I went on the hormone replacement therapy, and then I came off of it. And so my gynecologist at the time told me, he was like, well, what has happened is, he said, your pituitary gland has kicked in, and it's releasing enough estrogen to have stopped you from having the hot flashes. So I've gone all these years, I had my hysterectomy in 1995, so it's been over 30 years. Not a hot flash. All of a sudden, last week, I had one, and I knew exactly what it was. Oh, you don't forget that feeling. And so I'm like, why am I having a hot flash? And it was at night, so I didn't think much of it. And I didn't have any more. All of a sudden, last night, they were hitting me, they were hitting me like a flurry of Joe Frazier punches. Okay, boom, bang, bang. I was like, oh hell. Anyway, excuse my language, y'all. Anyway, the fan has been on ever since. And so I'm going to speak with my doctor, and I think I'm going to have to go back on HRT. So now that I'm 61, I'm at the age where all that should be happening. And the doctor did tell me back then, he was like, now when you come of age, when you should still be going through the change, he said, you'll still go through it. He said, but for now, you got a break. Well, break time's over. 30 years was long and beautiful, but oh Lord. And I'm not finna deal with that, and the night sweats, and then I haven't been sleeping well. It's a long story. I'm not even gonna get into all that. Okay, so how did I end up with that, talking about that? Anyway, we were talking about the shawl, the watermelon shawl, crochet along. Okay, let's get back. Let me get back, rev it on down and get back on point. Okay, so the watermelon shawl, I'm actually, for those of you who want to make the rectangular mesh shawl, basically, I'm going to give you the link to the She-Devil. Y'all know who she is. And you will see her video, because that's what I went by to make that, my rectangle shawls. That's the video that I referred to. And that's easy enough. Okay, but for the crochet along part, and I will be making a triangular one, I will show you step by step, like with this. Oh, that's how I got on the subject of the HRT and all that and hot flashes, because I'm wearing this shawl. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to do this. I can no longer find a video tutorial of how I did this, but I remembered it because I've made so many of them, so I remember it. And so therefore, I will take you step by step on how to make this the triangular mesh shawl. So if you want to do it in the watermelon color or any color, you can. So mine's going to be done in just a regular color. I'm not going to do the watermelon one in the triangular fashion, but I will be doing a regular rectangle shawl with some cotton yarn. So looks like I'm gonna be messing with Michaels. And speaking of Michaels, wait a minute, I got my first credit card bill, because y'all know I had charged a lot of mess on that credit card. I'm like, whoa, let me hurry up and get this paid off. So yeah, I won't be messing with Michaels too much. And actually, it's just that I had purchased a lot of stuff at the time, and that was like, what, 2 months ago? I think it's been like 2 months since I've been to Michaels, because I really haven't needed anything. But when I went, remember the Happy Face rugs, and I bought the Granny Stitch cards. Now I am gonna go back, but I'm gonna be paying cash, believe me, or using my regular credit card, not the doggone Michaels, because whew, when that bill came, I was like, oh no. It was $100 and something. I'm like, oh no. But anyway, so they have the second set that came out this summer, because the card was in this box saying that they were coming out with the second set of this. So I may as well go on and get them. So hopefully they have them. I'll look and see if they have the newer ones that just came out. And what else? There's something else I do need from Michaels. Well, I'm gonna get the cotton yarn for the crochet along shawl. So I'll go there, see what they have, and get that. And so that'll be it. But like I said, I'll be using my debit card or cash when I go to do that. I'm putting, where's my Michaels card? Because I had it today. Here it is right here. See it? Okay, so it's there right now, but it's getting put away in the drawer. It will be used for emergencies only. It would have to be something dire for me to use that card, okay? Again. So I'm through with it for now, because I have too many other things to get paid off, and I'm within striking distance, so I don't want to mess up and start using that card and run it up. Okay, anyway, so let's see. Something else. Preliminary. Okay, we talked about the shawl. So yeah, so let's see, what's today, the 6th of August? I'm going to upload the video on the 14th of August. And I may or may not complete the whole shawl. Well, I'll do like I did with the bag. I'll get so far and I'll make sure that I've explained enough to know what you'll know exactly what to do. And one thing about this particular shawl is worked from the top, is top down. So instead of you starting with the one and then getting it wider and wider where it's going to take you longer and longer, you're going to start at the longest point of the shawl, like I did with this, and you're going to work your way down. So basically, your longest part, which is what I'll be doing right with you, is the longest part, and then it's going to get shorter and shorter, and the project will go faster and faster. You'll be able to whip this shawl off in 1 to 2 days easily, because you're only going to be chaining 5 and then doing a single crochet for the diamond mesh stitch. Okay, so that should be a fun one. We will get that done, and so look for that video on the 14th unless something happens and I just can't do it. And I'll let you know if that happens. Okay, so in the meantime, I'm working on this. And let's see, it's something else, another preliminary before I get on with the story. Now I can't think of it, so if it comes to me, then I'll tell you about it at the end. But anyway, yeah. Back to the Mr. Andrews story. But before I continue on with the book, it was one story that I forgot to tell you guys about that I didn't put in my notes, and it dawned on me. It came to me and I was like, let me tell the story. It's about his best friend. He had a best friend, from childhood, and they grew up together, and even into adulthood they were good friends, and they lived close by right there in Langston. And so this best friend had a wife just like he did, and he and the wife didn't get along too well. So this one particular day, he said that they had been arguing all day long. He said it was never ending. He's like, you could hear them and everything else. And so he said later on that evening, all of a sudden they heard gunfire. And so he said he jumped up and he ran out, and he thought, I know this can't be from the friend's house. He said, but he said, it's either he has deleted her or she has deleted him. He didn't know which way. So he was a constable, and he worked as a constable. In fact, Mr. Andrews retired. That was his profession or whatever. He was a constable, so he wasn't a police officer, but he governed the town of Langston from, I think he said, up until the late 60s or early 70s when he retired. And so he said he was the constable, and then the police, although Langston has a police station now, back then the police station was in Guthrie, which is like a good 10 miles away. And so he was the constable, so if anybody needed arresting, they had this little jail, and that jail still stands. At least it did when I was there. It was just a little hut, and it was a jail. It was a jail hut. It was made of steel, and it was small. It was like a little closet, no bigger than a closet. And so if he needed to jail somebody, he put them in jail, and then the police would come, and then they haul them off to the main jail in Guthrie. Or he said he could make an arrest and he could drive them to Guthrie, or whatever. But he said for the most part, he would just take them to that jail. He said usually it would be disorderly because somebody's gotten drunk or something. He let them sleep it off there in that little jailhouse and then just release them the next day. He was the one who would decide whether or not they needed to go to the big jail, so to speak. So he said most of the stuff was just little stuff where they just spent the night, and then he would let them go. And, that was big back then, I guess. Nowadays people would laugh at something like that. But anyway, after he heard the gunfire, he jumped in his car and he went to his friends. And sure enough, it was his best friend who deleted his wife after a whole day of arguing and fussing and all that stuff. So he said that he told his friend, listen, because this is his best friend, he was like, I'm not going to take you to jail. He said, but I'm going to help you to escape. He said, but I need you to get into the trunk of the car. He said, because somebody, will probably call the police in Guthrie and they'll be on their way. So let me just go on and get you in the trunk. He said, now I'll take you to Oklahoma City, and then I'll take you to the bus station. He said, and then you just leave. He said, and he said his friend, because they were best friends, his friend trusted him wholeheartedly. He was like, okay. So his friend jumped into the trunk of the car, and he drove him straight to Guthrie to the jailhouse, okay? So he said he went in there, he stopped. He said he yelled in there, I stopped to get gas. I needed to get gas, so just wait, hold tight. I'm going to pay the attendant. He said he went to the jailhouse, and he got the, the jailer or whatever, told him, explained what had happened, and that it was his best friend, but he had to bring him to jail and everything. And so the officers came out to make, the formal arrest. And he said he went back and he popped it, opened the trunk. And he said the officers were standing right there to arrest him. He said, and the look that his friend gave him, and that's why I'm telling the story, because it still bothered him. He was really bothered by that. Although the friend is dead and gone and everything, I mean, that happened so many years ago, like back in the 50s, I believe he said. So, they weren't that old and everything, but it had happened years and years ago. But it still bothered him because it was his best friend. He said the look that his best friend gave him, it was just the ultimate look of, you betrayed me, you lied, blah, 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 blah. And he said he hung his head. He told him, you got to go with the officers now. And he said his friend was just so devastated over the fact that he truly thought that he was getting ready to get away. And nope. And his best friend took him to Guthrie, to the jail. And he said that was the end of the friendship. He said, I never saw him again after that, never talked to him again, nothing. He said, and it was really, really sad, that. And he said, and I missed him. Because he said he would have visited him, I guess, in prison or whatever, but he said they never spoke again after that. He's like, and that was a true loss. He said, and after that, I never took on another best friend. And then from childhood too, I was almost in tears when he told me that story. I was like, wow, that must have been horrible, to go through that. And it bothered him even to that day. He was in 100, 101, and still telling the story about how he lost his best friend. But anyway, okay, so let's continue on with the story. Now, where I left off was the fatal error that Alicia and I, or Alicia, actually, it was Alicia's idea. But I went along with it because I thought about it. I was like, this might get us some, Alicia was looking for notoriety. She trying to be important. And then me, on the other hand, I was thinking that Langston would back us. And so the idea, she said, I think we should let the president of the university know. And, you couldn't just go up to the president or whatever of the university. You had to make an appointment, and it better be something important if you had to meet with him about anything. And so Alicia approached the secretary, explained to the secretary what we were doing, and I wasn't there when she did it, and asked if she could set an appointment. So the secretary deemed it important enough to set an appointment, but she had to check with the president first, and he agreed. Dr. Holloway agreed to meet with us regarding this. And so the date was set, and so we had to meet, and that was like maybe a week and a half after we, had the meeting with the Oklahoma Heritage Association. And so we went to meet with the president. We sat there in the office, and they finally called us back. So we're sitting there, and so I let Alicia do the talking and everything. We both introduced ourselves and stuff. And Alicia, she explained about the book and everything. And so the president, he seemed really happy that this was happening. He was like, oh, that will be great. He was like, and 2 Langston students are writing a book and blah, 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 blah. Then all of a sudden, he said, but I tell you what, he said, perhaps Langston should be the ones doing the book. And I'm thinking, uh-oh, here we go. And so he basically wanted Langston to do the project. And so my thought was, and I didn't voice my thought at the time, but my thought was, if you want to do the book, why didn't you try to do the book before? You know, they did all this other stuff with the notoriety. And then, you know, I already knew how they were doing Butch. You know, Butch was basically like you know, he was a fixture there at the university and never went any further. And then there was this other young lady, because at the time, Langston was celebrating their 100th year as a college, because they were founded in 1900. And of course, Mr. Andrews was born in 1899. So he was 101, and so the school turned 100. And they used Mr. Andrews for that, because he was around when the school, you know, first became a school and all this stuff. And so he was used, you know, for that, because he was the only person living at the time the school was established, although he was only a year old. But the point is, he was older than the school. And so anyway, when he said that, we got kind of quiet, and I'm looking at Alicia like, uh-oh. And so he was like, yeah, the more I think of it, he was like, I think we should do the story. And then he said, if we do the story, he said, perhaps I could contact the Oklahoma Heritage Association. And then he's talking about who could do the story and all. And I was like, well, they've already set up who's going to do the forward and, you know, things like that. It's already set up, and we've met with them, and we're going to be meeting again. So I'm kind of letting them know we're kind of ahead on it. It's not in really it's in the planning phases, but this is what they want us to do and all that. And I'm thinking, why am I even telling this? You know, but I did have to kind of explain what was happening. And so he said, nope, we'll do it. So then all of a sudden the meeting ends, you know, he kind of dismissed us to leave, and we walked out, and I said, Alicia, I was like, we just lost the book deal. I was like, we shouldn't have told him anything. So at that point, I'm kind of mad at her. I was like, but it was my fault too, because I agreed to it. So I was like, we got to do something. I was like, but we cannot tell Mr. Andrews about this. I was like, because it would really affect him or whatever. I was like, maybe we should tell his niece and nephew. I was like, or we should call the Oklahoma Heritage Association and tell them what he said, and maybe the literary attorney or whatever. But then I decided before, because we said we would call the Oklahoma Heritage Association, because we needed to beat the president of the university, you know, from calling them, because we didn't know what he was going to say. He might have said to them, oh, they don't want to do it. They decided to turn it over to me or whatever, when he was actually just stealing the whole idea and everything. And I was mad. And believe me, I paid the price behind this. Okay, so, but I told Alicia, we cannot tell Mr. Andrews. And so in the meantime, when I got home, I called my aunt right away. And then my aunt, you know, she got me in touch with her son, my first cousin, who got in touch with his uncle, you know, her husband's brother, or his father's brother. And so the consensus was that I needed to obtain my own literary attorney. And so that's what I did. That next day, I called a literary attorney. And so the literary attorney, he basically advised me. He said, unless something begins to happen, he's like, have you signed any paperwork or anything? I was like, nope, we haven't done it, you know. And so he said, basically, I don't need to take your case until, you know, things are signed and etched in stone. He said, and another thing you're going to need is a literary agent on top of an attorney. And so I had everything all set up. So he wasn't hired, and I didn't have the money no way. But if I had needed to, I'm quite sure I could have gotten the money if I would have needed to go to court or anything like that. So I was set. And I didn't even tell Alicia, because my aunt and my cousin both said, do not even mention that to anyone. You're just protecting your stake in this and whatnot. And so he said, let your co-author do the same if she hasn't already. And so I was like, okay. I said, I won't say anything. But in the meantime, we did call the Oklahoma Heritage Association, and we told them about what had happened. And at that point, the president hadn't even called them or anything, not yet, but he might have been trying to get his ducks in a row with who he wanted to do the writing of the book, because it sure wasn't us, and all that stuff. And then he was probably gonna, approach or call the Heritage Association. So anyway, they said, don't worry about that. It won't be happening. They said the only way that can happen, they said, first of all, we would not do it. We would say no to him. We've already established the book is about Mr. Andrews, and you two are the authors. And I said, that's what I explained to the president. I said he wasn't too happy when I said that, but that's what it is. Everything was set up. John Hope Franklin, the forward, they gave us instructions on what to do and all this stuff. And then we were meeting again. The niece and nephew were on board, all that. So anyway, so they said the only way that Langston could actually do the story, they would have to do it independently, and Mr. Andrews would need to agree to allow them to do it. And so she said, your best bet is to give Mr. Andrews the heads up, or his niece and nephew, and let them know. And sure enough, that's just the route that the president was going to take. I think he contacted the niece and nephew. I can't remember exactly how that went down, but we did end up telling Mr. Andrews, and we told him in such a way that, it was as if it was kind of nonchalant, but we told him we've already set up with the Oklahoma Heritage Association, but now the president wants to be the one to do the book. And he was like, no, you all are going to do the book. We're doing it just the way we already planned it. He was like, to hell with him. And that's just how he said it too. We were like, okay. And so I guess I really don't know what happened behind the scenes, but the president, all I know is that he found out, and I'm quite sure he probably contacted the niece and nephew, or he may have come and visited Mr. Andrews himself. I don't know what happened. That part I do not know, because I was not there. All I know after that was, next thing I know, I was being kicked out of Langston, y'all. I got kicked out. So all this happened. We met with the Oklahoma Heritage Association in, I think it was either late May or early June. Okay, so by the time this happened, it was probably later June, and then July was when I got kicked out, okay, that same year. So now the story starts with me being out of Langston. Okay, and how I got kicked out of Langston, first of all, the president, he was mad at Alicia and I both, because she ended up leaving. But what happened was, every year, I was into my second year by time, the book deal and stuff started. It wasn't immediate. I had known Mr. Andrews at least a year, because I met him in January of 2000, right after my father died. And we were into 2001 by now, when the book deal even came up. This was like May of 2001. So we had known each other a year by then. Okay, so what happened was, since I was in my sophomore year of college, for each semester, if you filled out, I did the student loans, and I also qualified for financial aid as an out-of-towner. They would not give me residency in Oklahoma, although I had changed my license and all that stuff. I still wasn't considered an Oklahoma resident. So the residents got more in financial aid. I got the bare minimum, just enough to basically pay for books. So anyway, but to my advantage, whenever you, when it came time to register for your either fall, summer, winter, whatever semester or whatever, if you did your financial aid paperwork early, you got a bonus. So you got like $1,000 bonus. So every semester that I did there, and I went to summer school too, because I only held at 12, I did 12 credit hours each semester. And that's how I was able to maintain a higher GPA. I did not cram 15 credit hours. Some people were taking 18 credit, no, not me. I did 12. I did the bare minimum. I wanted no more than 3 classes. And so 2 classes were on Tuesday and Thursday. They were 90-minute classes. And then I had my Monday, Wednesday, and Friday classes, which were hour-long classes. And so that's how I did it. And it was easy for me to maintain that work, and then have a little leisure time, the book and all that stuff. Okay, so I would turn in my stuff early because I depended on that $1,000 refund, because that would get my books, my Scantrons, and then I would have like maybe $400 left over, and I would save that for food, okay? Because those little food stamps that I got on campus was nothing. Okay, so that 400 would get me through the semester. Okay, so anyway, so summer classes were coming up. I had set up my classes, filled out my financial aid stuff and all that way back in February, because I always did it like 4 or 5 months early so that I could get the bonus. I did it, had my copies of my paperwork. So I went to register because usually everything went smoothly. You go to register, pick out your classes, and you're done. They were like, "You're not on the list for classes this summer." I was like, "Yes, I am. I filled out my paperwork way back in February." They said, "You need to go and talk to your counselor in the administration office." I was like, "Okay." So I went, and I forgot his name. I asked him about it. I said, "I filled out my paperwork back in February." I said, "And so my financial aid should have gone through and everything, and I should have been able to enroll for classes." And so he's like, "I don't see anything." He pulled everything up. He said, "I don't see anything here for you." I'm like, "I did it." And so I told him, "I'll be back." So I left. I had to go all the way home. The apartment is clear across campus and way over on the other side. So I knew it would take me at least a half hour. I dug that paperwork up, went back, and I met with them again. I was like, "Here's the paperwork right here. I filled it out February the whatever date, 2001. I was like, "Here it is. I did it. It was stamped here in the office. You signed it. Everything was turned in." He was like, "Well, I'm not seeing anything. I don't know what happened. Let me check with the secretary," because she was supposed to file everything away. So then he comes back. He was like, "The secretary said that she doesn't remember filing." I was like, "Well, then the paperwork was lost." That was it. I could not enroll. And then it had a domino effect. You cannot stay on campus if you're not enrolled at school. So I lost my apartment. And then on top of it, it was abrupt. It was like that very next day, I was told I had to pack up and leave campus because school had started that day. And since I was not enrolled, I could not stay in that apartment. I would have to leave. And when I left for good. First of all, I had to move back in with my aunt and uncle. And so they actually came and moved me, had to bring a truck and all that, because I had this townhome. So I didn't have my own furniture because it was furnished, but I had clothes and, all kind of items that needed to be packed up and moved. So I had to suddenly move. And so I'm at my aunt and uncle's house, and I was like, "Oh, I got to do something. I got to work. I got to do something, So I went to UCO, University of Central Oklahoma, which was in Edmond. I drove straight to the campus, and I applied. I was like, "I'm not going back to Langston." And so my uncle, with him being a professor, he was like, "Don't do that." He was like, "No." He was like, "You want to be at Langston because they'll treat you better than what they'll treat you at UCO." I was like, "Well," I was like, "if it gets any worse than this, I would be surprised." I was like, "The way I've been treated at Langston." And basically, that incident, I was like, and it was another incident I will tell you about when I tell you about my college days. And that was before all this happened. Oh, but that was a story out of this world. But anyway, so I told him, "Nope, I'm going." And so then my aunt, my uncle's wife, said, "Well, you have a 3.5 GPA. Do you really think you're going to do just as well at UC?" I was like, "I know I will." I was like, "You think that they were giving me good grades just because?" I was like, "Nope, that's not the case." One thing about it, when I got to Langston, very few people knew that my uncle was my uncle. very few people. It was his closest of friends. He had two friends there that worked in the same hall that he worked in. And everybody else, no one knew that, because I never wanted it to be said that because, you know, she's Dr. Hatley's niece or whatever, this is why she's getting good grades. Believe me, everything was based on merit. And I earned every grade that I got while I was there. No one knew. No one knew. Not even the president. No one even knew that that was my uncle, unless he told it. And he really didn't deal with too many people. He dealt with his two friends, and that was it. And in fact, the three of them, they didn't really deal with too many. They avoided folks and things like that. So, you know, they did their job and they went home. And so anyway, and then my uncle ended up retiring in 2001 anyway. So when he retired, that was beautiful. You know, the fact that he retired, I was like, ooh, good. But anyway, and that was, then that way I knew that I could, you know, go on with my college, because I had planned to be there for my whole college career. I was like, good, because, you know, now I don't have to walk on eggshells and it won't slip or no one will find out that he's my uncle. And so anyway, so I told him, nope, I'm going to UCO. That's that. I was like, if I do bad, I'll just do bad. I said, but I don't think I will. Don't you know, UCO, number one, they gave me, and I'll get back to Mr. Andrews' story because I'm into my college story now, but it all ties in. Okay, so UCO, they saw my GPA. First of all, they gave me residency because I didn't tell them anything about being from Michigan. They just saw I had the Oklahoma license plates and all that stuff and license. And so they assumed I was an Oklahoma resident, which I was. I had been there over a year. And then secondly, when they saw my GPA, and then I was non-traditional, and although they didn't have the same program, they had a lot of non-traditional students that attended night school, and that's how I enrolled. I had no day classes. All my classes were in the evening. And so anyway, so I was able to work. First of all, they gave me a job. I had enough credits to where they let me do like this practicum for teaching, and I was able to substitute and all this other stuff. So I went in with a good job. They gave me a scholarship right off the top because of my GPA. It was like the whole world just opened up, like I should have been there all along. All this mess that Langston never did, UCO did. They appreciated me as a student. And don't you know, my GPA rose while I was there. When I came out of college, that's the college I had to drop out of. And my GPA was 3.7 when I came out. It never went any higher than 3.5 at Langston. And I was surprised it was even that with all the stress I was under. But anyway, okay, so here I am suddenly at UCO. And so I was like, because my aunt and uncle, they were mad. They weren't too happy that I did that, you know, because they just knew I was setting myself up for failure, which I wasn't. Hold on just a second. Okay, I'm back. I had to take a sip of water. I didn't want to gulp on camera, so I paused you. Anyway, so yeah, they didn't want me to set myself up for failure, which I knew I wasn't. And like I said, I did very well. And then all the doors open and everything else when I got there. So anyway, in the meantime, and this is how it all ties into Mr. Andrews. Okay, now, during the course of all this time, because by the time I got put out, we were into the month of June, and a heat wave had hit Oklahoma. Okay, so we had done, because it was like back in May, it was like right after the Heritage Association gave me the film and the tapes and all that. We got to work immediately. Okay, so we had gotten quite a few tapes done because Alicia and I would go. It was like, I think we went on Tuesday and Thursday, and then we would go again on Saturday to get recordings of him telling his story, because we didn't want to wear him out, and he actually loved it because we caught him on tape, and my tapes are in because I need to get those, they're safely put away and everything. They're still good, but they're micro mini tapes, and I need to get them transferred. I know they can be restored and put onto CD or something like that. So with him telling his story, I have a videotape, the videotape from the from when we went to the land. I have that videotape. It's a lot of stuff that I have there in the shed, and it's put away neatly in a tub. In fact, a couple of tubs. And so everything, the last time I looked at everything was still intact and all that. So I'll eventually be getting that out of the shed, and then I'll show the things to you, that the stuff that I have out there. But anyway, so in the meantime, a heat wave had hit that June there in Oklahoma. And so the temperatures, no, not in June, well, from the end of May and throughout June and the whole summer, actually, this heat wave, it was unusual heat. Normally the temperatures would hover right around 100 to 105, and that was hot enough. Believe me, my first year I came home to Michigan. I was like, I can't deal with this heat. And my aunt said, good luck going to Michigan for the next month and a half. She was like, this heat will be waiting on you when you get back. I was like, really? It'll be September, or right at the beginning of September, right around Labor Day. She was like, it's going to be even hotter. I was like, shoot, you lying. I get back and it was, okay, I won't even go into that. That was my first year, okay? I spent the whole summer in Michigan and got back there. It was cold, Michigan, cold, rainy, and dark. Got there and it was blazing. And I ended up catching the summer cold from hell. Couldn't even get to school on the first week because I had such a horrible cold from that incident. I was like, never again. So this summer I decided to stick it out. And then of course it's a heat wave. So instead of it being 100 to 105, and usually the heat didn't kick in until around July. The heat had kicked in May. And it was getting hotter and hotter by the day. Well, Mr. Andrews, being always cold, he wouldn't turn on his air conditioner because he would be cold. He messed around and got dehydrated and suffered from heat exhaustion. His niece and nephew came to see about him because they came on Tuesday and Thursday. They came that Tuesday morning and there he was out. So they had to call the ambulance. And so he ended up, the closest hospital was in Edmond, which is, you got Langston, Guthrie, and then Edmond's the next town before you get to Oklahoma City. So they had to get him to Edmond, so he was hospitalized for about a week. So that put the book at a standstill while that was going on. So I told Alicia about that. I said, he's in the hospital. I said, once he's better, I said he suffered from heat exhaustion and stuff. And then his dog died and everything else because it was hot. And then, he had a dog named Lucky. And poor little Lucky, he died because, Mr. Andrews wasn't able to tend to him. And so he died, the dog, from the heat exhaustion. So, so Lucky was gone. It was just terrible. So anyway, he was in the hospital in Edmond. And so by then I was in the process of moving to Edmond because I was at my aunt and uncle's in Oklahoma City. But then I found an apartment right by the campus and right by the hospital. And so I ended up moving into the apartment called Chowning Heights. That was the name of the apartments. And I love that place. Anyway, so Mr. Andrews got released after about 5 days. And when he got released, the niece and nephew had decided, because of the heat wave, and they were afraid that what had happened would happen again, they decided to let him, because they asked him if he wanted to come stay with them in Oklahoma City. And he didn't. He wanted to basically be in his area. And so they said, that's okay. They said, you will need to stay at the nursing home in Guthrie until the heat breaks. So however long that was going to be, and I figured that would be all summer. So I let Alicia know once I found out he was going to the nursing home, and he wasn't too thrilled about that either, but he went. Okay, so, well, he had no choice really. And so I told Alicia about it. I said, it's going to be imperative. I was like, because he doesn't want to be in that nursing home. It's hot. I said, this could take him out. I was like, we need to go see about him, make sure everything is okay. And she was like, oh yeah, I'll go visit him, I'll go see him, blah, 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 blah. So I was like, okay, so what day do you want to take? And then I will take these days, because at this point I'm in Edmond. So I done called her. And I would go back to Langston to visit, that type of thing. I had friends there and Alicia and all that. So I went to visit her. And then I was checking on Mr. Andrews' house also. Because he was going to be at the nursing home. So the niece and nephew, that saved them. They could go see him at the nursing home. And then because I was still going to Langston, usually once out of the week or whatever, I would go check on the house. And so anyway, she was like, oh, I'll go see, I'll make sure go see him on Saturdays. And so, and it was another day she had picked, because remember, she had a family. She had 2 sons and a husband, also. So I knew she was going to be limited, but I wanted her to at least, she took the time out for the book project. So I figured that same time, or even just one of those days, she could take to go see him if she wanted, to see him. So she said she would, and that was fine. And then I went on my days that I said I would be there. And so I would see about him and everything. He wanted to come home and stuff. And so finally he decided one day he was going to just be a terror. He demanded to go home. And when he was told he couldn't go home, he hit the nurse's aide. Boom, knocked her to the floor and got kicked out of the nursing home, y'all. When he got kicked out of the nursing home, they had to take him to Oklahoma City. So he did end up going to the nieces and nephews. Now I'm in Edmond, so either way, it didn't matter because I was close. I was close to Guthrie, and then I was very close to Oklahoma City. So while he was at his niece and nephew, something happened, and he ended up being hospitalized again. All this is happening during the summer months. So this is August. Whatever happened, he ended up in the hospital, and on his second day there, he got up out of bed. And see, now if you're considered a fall risk or whatever, they have that alarm. They didn't have no alarm on his bed or anything. And he was at the Edmond Hospital. And I lived right around the corner I was in walking distance, but I was working at the time. And then also, by then I was working, and then school had started because it was August. And so basically I knew that I could get up there because I had evening classes, but my evening classes were only 3 days a week. So Tuesday and Thursday, I didn't have any classes, nor on the weekends. So I was planning on going up there that Tuesday. This was a Monday. So I get a call from the niece. He had got out of bed at the hospital on like his second day there, fell and broke his hip. And when the niece told me that, I didn't say anything to her, but I said to myself, this is it. I knew a lady who died from a hip fracture, and I don't even think she had made 60. She was like in her 50s. But I know you can die from a hip fracture. Why, I don't know, so I won't even get into all that. But I knew that would be the end of him. I was like, that's it. To myself, I was like, he won't make it out of this hospital. I didn't think he would. So anyway, my thing was he ain't going back home. And then I was like, well, that's it for the book. And I guess he knew too, because when I went up to the hospital to see him with the broke hip, he all tractioned up and everything. He said, Davis, he was like, I want you to write the book about yourself and incorporate me in it. I was like, well, we're writing the book now. I was like, we'll be okay. You'll get out of here and we'll resume. He said, no, I want you to write the book about yourself and incorporate me in it. That was his way of telling me I'm not making it. And I already knew. So I'm like, okay, time to soak this up because time won't be long. We don't know what's going to happen here. So there he was in the hospital. And he was still talking, eating, and everything, being encouraged. So the niece and nephew had this vacation plan that had been planned like, I don't know if it was months before or close to a year. And so they were trying to decide, did they want to cancel or go? And so at the last minute, they decided they would go. And I was like, you can go, because they were only going to be gone like 3 days. And I think they were going to Texas or something like that to see their son. And they were going to be gone for 3 days and then be back. So they were leaving that Saturday and they were going to be back that Monday. And so I told them, okay, since y'all doing that, I said, I don't have school or work or anything the weekend. I was like, now I do have to go to school on Monday, but I don't have to work on Monday. I said, and then I have Tuesday off. I was like, so when I do my class on Monday, I said, I go to class at 3 o'clock. That day that was my earliest class at 3 o'clock. And I got out of class at about four, it was either 4 o'clock or 4:30. I think it was 4:30. I said, then I can shoot up to the hospital. I said, I could shoot up to the hospital and see about them and everything. So that day I shot up there. They had gone to Texas. And of course, they had left their number with me in case of emergency. And of course, the hospital, they had the cell phone number and everything. So I go up to the hospital and the nurse says to me, he's having surgery this evening and someone needs to sign. I said, well, his niece and nephew are out of town. I was like, have you contacted them? And she was like, oh, I didn't know they were out of town. You know, the other crew, I guess, knew or whatever. So I was like, yeah, I've got their number. I was like, but they left their number on file here. I was like, you can call them and see if they'll give consent. I said, but I'm here. I said, and I'll be here tomorrow if he has to have the surgery. And then I'm thinking to myself, oh, Lord, you know. So anyway, someone needed to sign the consent form. Hold on, let me get another sip of water. Okay, I'm back. Yes, someone needed to sign the consent form. And since the niece and nephew are out of town and the doctor was doing the surgery that evening, guess who the niece gave permission to sign the consent form? Me. She told the nurse, let her sign it. She'll be there. Let her sign the consent form. I'm giving consent for her to sign the consent. And so I ended up signing the consent. And the whole time I was writing, my hand shaking like this. And I'm like, God, please, do not let this man die. Because I'm thinking he's 100. By then, Mr. Andrews had turned 102 on March 26th of that year. So now he's 102. No, he was he 102? Yeah, he was. Yeah, because he had just turned 101 when we had met. He turned 102 that second year, and this was the second year. So I'm like, Lord, please, don't let this man die on my watch. And me being, and I hope I'm not signing the certificate of death, okay? Or the surgery of the death. Wait, something. I said something of death, okay? I'm like, if this man died during surgery, you know, because going under anesthesia at that age and whatnot, I knew he was strong, but he was still 102. So I'm praying. And so I had a word of prayer with him because they came up to, get him prepped and everything. And so they let me go into the surgical area and stuff. And it was on another floor of the hospital. And I sat in the waiting room, but they let me come back there, before they took him back. And by then they done gave him the happy meds. So he was kind of almost out of it. And so I was like, Mr. Andrews, I'm going to have a word of prayer with you. And we did all that. And then they came and they rolled him back to surgery. He was out of surgery. It was less than an hour. And I'm in that room all by myself. And they came in there and I'm thinking, oh, here it comes. And they came and they said, Miss Davis? I was like, yes. They said he did very well. And he's in recovery now. And he'll be going back to his room within, I forgot. It was like maybe, it was 7 that evening when he came out. Because it wasn't even dark yet. And the sun was still shining and everything. And they took him up to his room and I went up and he was out, he was still asleep and everything. So that I made sure that he was doing okay and that he was tucked in and everything. And so that's when I left because did I have class? No, I didn't have class the next day. So I told the nurse I'll be up first thing in the morning. And then the niece and nephew was going to be there too because they were coming back because the surgery was on a Monday and they were coming back on Monday evening, and so I knew they would be there Tuesday, which they were. So I was up there Tuesday, and so anyway, so he was healing from the surgery. They had started physical therapy and everything, and I'm thinking, okay, he just may pull through after all. He's doing really good here. He was his normal self, except he was just laid up because of the hip. And I think they had put a pin in it or whatever, but they had started physical therapy. And I was like, he got a little fight in him. He might pull through this. After all, I'm thinking this to myself. So anyway, in the meantime, he did, wait, did he get released? No, wait. No, he didn't get released. He didn't. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. He ended up, and that leads up to the death. So we're going to stop there. But now I'm going to backtrack to Alicia again. And this is where, you know, the book thing, because I really got off kilter. Anyway, so now I'm out of college. Then, I mean, not out of Langston, and I'm at UCO. So school has started and everything. So in the meantime, Alicia, she ended up not being in for the semester, but because her husband was still in, she didn't get put out of the apartments and stuff. But she ended up transferring. I think she decided to transfer to OU, which is, no, OSU, Oklahoma, because you had Oklahoma State University, UCO, University of Central Oklahoma. You had OU, the Boomer Sooner people, they were in Stillwater. And then you had Langston, you know, and then there was Rose College. That was like your junior college or, you know, that type of thing. So it was quite a few colleges, and all of them were like within a 30-mile radius of each other. So you have students all over the place. So Alicia ended up transferring, but not then, but they were still at the apartments and whatnot. And, you know, once things started happening with Mr. Andrews after he broke his hip and everything, I never contacted her again. In fact, after he got kicked out the nursing home, I assumed that she knew that he had got kicked out. And I assumed that she had been visiting him because he had been there quite, at least 2.5 to 3 weeks before all that happened. Almost a month. It may have been a month, because that was in May when he went, you know, after he got out the hospital. That was like the end of May. And during the month of June, he was in the hospital. And I mean, he went in the hospital in May. He went to the nursing home like in June. He was at that nursing home to probably at least mid-July. And then he went back, you know, hit the nurse and everything, went to his nieces and nephews mid-July, and then he ended up back in the hospital, broke his hip, all that stuff. And then, you know, and that's where we were. And so my assumption, but things were happening so much. And then with me being in school, I wasn't seeing Felicia. Or Alicia, sorry. I keep, okay, y'all know her real name now, but we'll still keep with Alicia. Okay, so I wasn't really seeing her. You know, but my assumption was she said that she would be going to the nursing home and whatnot, you know, on certain days and all that. So my assumption was that she knew, you know, what was going on with him. I hadn't talked to her. And so anyway, as it turns out, and I'll tell you this, she had not gone to visit him one time, okay? And this is leading up to the death, because that's when our friendship ended up breaking up. Okay, so that's where we're going to leave off. Actually, I'm going to take you up to September 11th. Okay, so a little more, y'all, a little more. Okay, so during all this time, September 11th, we get into the month of September. I done stepped on the crochet hook, injured myself. That was August 20th. You know, but I kept going. You know, I went to school and was checking on Mr. Andrews. I was there all the time. Okay, so September comes, then September 11th came. I was there at the hospital, and he was in the bed and I'm sitting in the chair, and we're watching, because they had canceled school that day, and I think they ended up canceling school for like the whole week when September 11th of 2001 happened. And so we're sitting up there watching the footage of it, because someone had turned his TV on and it was everywhere, okay? So he's watching it and he was like, what happened? And so I told him, I was like, we're under attack. You know, the terrorists hijacked 3 airplanes and they crashed them, 2 of them into the World Trade Center and 1 into the Pentagon. And he was like, whoa. Now, that was September 11th. He passed away on September 26th. So this was 12 days before he died. So I'm going to end it here. And then in the next video, I'm going to take you to the death. And how long we been on? Almost an hour? Yeah, we've been on an hour. So yeah, I'll be able to wrap it up on Sunday. So we're going to go up to the death, our goodbyes, because we did our goodbyes, uh, what became of the book deal after his death, and how Alicia and I ended up not being friends anymore. Oh, it was a nightmare. Nightmare. But anyway, so that's where we will begin on the next one. Ooh, I'm tired. I haven't slept but 2 hours last night. Okay, y'all. So I'm tired. Okay, so I'm going to get off of here, you guys. And I will talk to you guys later. And may God bless you all. I hope you enjoyed today's ramble. Okay, every time I talk about this story, I feel as if I'm rambling. But that's because I'm trying to remember over 20 years ago. You know, this was in between the year of 2000 and 2001. We're talking, it's been 24 years since his death, or just about. It'll be 24 years this year since his death. And then we're talking 25 years, you know, since we met. It doesn't even seem like all that time has passed, but it has. And so, you know, it's a lot of things, you know, as things come to me. So telling the story, I'm trying to make sure I'm not missing anything. And I'm quite sure I probably did miss some things, but I'm getting the most important stuff. So we're going to wrap it up this Sunday. So look forward to that. And I think our next story time is going to be my college experience, since I've already touched on it and stuff. Ooh, that's a long one, but it's going to be good. Okay, so I'll talk to you guys later, and may God bless you all. I'm getting ready to take a nap, y'all. Bye-bye.